get started, and just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, so if any of your colleagues want to hear about this information, we'll be sending the recording out after the meeting. And so if you have any questions about the content or any sort of technical questions about the GoToWebinar, feel free to type those in, and Jessica will either respond to you via chat, or she will let us know that you have a question. We want you to feel free to interrupt us as we're going through the content here with any questions that you have about the consortium and the projects that we're talking about today. So feel free to type in those questions, and hopefully we'll give you some meaningful answers today, or we'll table it and get back to you after the webinar. So today on the agenda, we're going to talk about first a little bit about education analytics itself and who we are. We're going to talk about the value-added project using the MAP assessment. We'll also talk a little bit about this consortium's history and where we started and where we are today. And then we'll also talk a little bit about what we're calling technical SLOs and SLO tool that we've developed using the NWEA MAP assessment. So first, a little bit about education analytics. EA was founded by Robert Meyer. We're a nonprofit located in Madison, Wisconsin, and some of you may know Dr. Meyer from his work at UW. He also is the director of VARC, and a little bit more about EA is that we have a large staff here with various roles. So we have econometricians, data analysts, policy experts, and project managers who all serve in different roles and have different areas of expertise across student growth metrics, education policy, technical assistance, and project management. And we use those various areas of expertise across the country, helping educators think about statistics and education. Today presenting are myself, Anne Marie Weber, as well as Sean McLaughlin will be joining me as well. And so we'll be giving you more information about these various projects. First, Sean's going to talk a little bit about our approach to building value-added models.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be going over our value-added project that's existed for a couple of years now. And everyone can breathe a sigh of relief that I'm not actually going to go through the oak tree analogy yet again today. But for anybody that has not seen it before, you can go ahead and go on the URL linked here, and you'll be able to see that if you have missed it before. What that is, it's a way to understand the concept of a value-added metric in an analogy format that we found useful for educators across the country. So please go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. But I am just going to do a tiny overview just for anybody to get a refresher on a value-added methodology and how it works. So not the whole oak tree analogy, but a little bit of information about it, linking the analogy to value-added in education. So a couple slides on this. So EA, what we do is we create statistical predictions for students using test data. But the analogy, what we did to explain it there, is each tree gets a customized prediction for how high it would grow based on its starting height and characteristics. You can see here in this example, a tree has a starting height and then environmental factors that are beyond a gardener's control. We would use adjustments there to find out how high the tree might be at the end of the year prediction. In education, what we do is we use student test scores as well as different student characteristics to come up with a customized prediction for each student. And that is the end-of-year MAP score that we would use for our value-added project. The next thing that we would do is we would calculate whether each student exceeded or did not meet their prediction and by how much. So there's a two-step process here. The first step is to determine if each student exceeded or did not meet prediction and by how much. Our student on the left, we have a certain prediction there, the dotted line projection here for how a student would perform at the end of the year after all those end-of-year test scores come in. Then we find out, based on the performance of similar students, whether the student exceeded or did not meet that prediction and by how much, comparing their actual score to that predicted score. On the right, we have a different student. This time the prediction is different. It's customized based on the characteristics of that student, and we have an actual score that is a bit lower than that. So in this case, the student did not meet prediction by 4 points. So this first step is just determining, compared to those predictions, how did the students perform on that end of the year test. The next thing we do with value added is to determine the average effect of a grade level team or a school on student growth. So what we do is each one of those arrows represents whether or not a student exceeded or did not meet their prediction and by how much. Then we want to find out on average how much did students exceed or did not meet those predictions. On the left side, we have school A with an average growth of a little over 3 points higher than we predicted for each student. That would mean that this school would have above average value added. School B, it looks like more often than not, the students did not meet their prediction by a little bit. On average, the students did not meet their prediction by about 1 RIT point. In this case, we'd say that the school had below average value added. So that's just in a few slides trying to get at the big picture of how a value added metric works and how these different data come together to figure out our value added methodology here and the results that we would send out. So I'll just pause for a little bit to see if any questions come in about how this methodology works before Anne-Marie gives us a little bit more information about how this methodology is applied within the consortium. All right.
Thanks, Sean. With the consortium, we, back in 2013, conducted a pilot to see if there would be districts interested in receiving value-added results from their MAP assessment. And we found out that there were a good group of districts who were interested in that. So there were 19 districts who participated in the pilot with about 30,000 students. And we sent out Excel reports for value-added grades 3 through 8 in reading and math. Last year, for the 2013-14 school year, we continued to produce the value-added results. And in this case, we added district-level results as well as expanding the grades to include kindergarten, first and second, and 9th grade. The consortium continued to grow. We added a few more districts as well as a few more students. For next year, or I should say this current school year, we're continuing with the value-added reports, and we're also adding PDF reports. The PDF reports will give a better visual representation than the bare bones Excel reports, and they'll be able to, we'll be doing both the district as well as the school reports. For those of you who are in the consortium for 2013-14, we are producing PDF reports for the data that you already received, and we'll be sending that out in the next couple of weeks. And we're hoping that you'll be able to help provide us with some feedback to continue to improve those reports for the upcoming, or for the current school year and the upcoming reports. For 2015-16, in addition to the value-added reports, we're also going to be adding an SLO tool, and that tool will be released this fall to help provide guidance in goal setting. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. But first, about the data process within this consortium. I think one of the best features about this consortium is that there is no staff time involved from the districts in getting and sending any data files. So for the value-added reports, we're able to get the data from, the assessment data from NWEA and the demographics data from DPI. The only difficulty there is that the IDs don't match. So NWEA has their own ID, DPI has the state ID. So in order to get around that, NWEA sends EA the assessment results as well as student identifiers like student name, date of birth, what school they're from. EA then removes the test results and sends only the student identifiers to DPI. And DPI is able to run what they're calling a matching algorithm to be able to match the NWEA ID to the DPI demographics database. And they do a really great job of this. I think last year's matching rate was like 99.9%. And she emailed me and said that she was able to match all the students except for 60, and then I think she was able to do about 40 of them by hand. So the algorithm does a great job, and then they even match some of the students by hand that may not have complete data. Once we're able to receive the demographics from DPI that are then matched to the NWEA IDs, that's when we begin the value-added modeling process. The value-added reports contain value-added scores for reading and math in K through 9, depending on which grades you test in. What's nice about the Excel results is that they're able to be sortable. You can filter in different ways for different schools or different views that you may want to see. Again, those are at the district, school, and grade level. And here's an example Excel report displaying the value-added estimates as well as confidence intervals and the value-added color codes. So the new piece of information, or the new addition to the value-added reports, are going to be these new PDF reports. I think they give a really nice visual representation to the estimates as well as the confidence intervals, as well as giving a little description about to help interpretation. In addition to the PDF reports that we'll be sending to the members of the 2013-14 consortium, we'll also be sending a report guide to help you interpret these reports. And again, I'll be looking for feedback about these reports. I'll be sending out a survey, but feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call to let me know how we can continue to improve these reports so that they suit your needs. So for the timeline for the value-added reports, we are shifting things up just a bit. In the past, we've released reports in the fall, late fall, usually around November. But in order to accommodate the SLO work as well, we've received some feedback from districts that they would like to receive the reports at the beginning of the school year to get that information out to their teachers. We're having districts sign up by June 15th for the value-added reports. We'll conduct the analysis over the summer and then release the reports in September. Any questions on the value-added work or reports in the consortium? All right, next we're going to start talking about SLOs, and Sean's going to give a brief background on how we're thinking about SLOs.
All right, thanks, Anne-Marie. So thinking about what's the genesis of this, what are we doing here? So for SLOs are rolling out across the country, and Wisconsin is one of those states that's requiring all teachers to submit SLOs. So there's a need there. Teachers and schools need to find a solution for this. And we've found working at different places that it's often very difficult to create rigorous yet achievable goals. It's hard to be able to collect that information in a systematic way, to be able to give teachers and schools and principals guidance about what is a reasonable goal to set for a student, what is a reasonable goal to set for a classroom as a whole. How are we able to collect those data and then make good judgment calls on what's a reasonable goal or not? We heard districts were talking about that, thinking about the data that we do provide in the form of these value-added reports for MAP. How could we harness that kind of statistical horsepower that we have going on in these sort of metrics, the kind of rigor that we bring for making adjustments for student context? How could that sort of information be packaged in a way that could be compliant with the kind of SLO framework that Wisconsin has in place, which involves things like early in the year setting a goal for students and then checking in mid-year and then coming up with a solution and a score along the way? How can we get all these things to get in the right kind of time alignment for an SLO solution. So a little bit more background. One of the places that we work, we found an example like this, not in Wisconsin, but just for an example context for you about how even with best intentions, things cannot go so well. So even in a place that would use the NWEA MAP assessment, which has a very rigorous scale, it has a lot of data behind it that come up with these scale scores, these RIT scores that are produced. There's national growth norms to take into account. All those different things are coming to play here. We could see a teacher might set up themselves with a system like this, where they're choosing how are they going to come up with a 1, 2, 3, or a 4 in their rating choice. How would they determine how to do that? And using this process, they might come up with this, saying if they got 90 to 100% of their students to meet their growth norm, they might get a 4. And I'll read through the rest. If anybody wants to make a prediction about what might go right or wrong about this, please go ahead and type that in. They might have a 3 would mean 80% to 89% of their students met the growth goal. If 70 to 79% would meet the goal, they would give themselves a 2. And between 0 to 69% of students meeting the growth norm, they would give themselves a 1 on their SLO. So any comments in the chat about what they think might happen if this is how a teacher set up their SLO example? All right, given some time for some typing, but basically what we found when somebody very reasonable might come up with this without knowing the full context of how all this works with growth norms is that it's going to be very hard for a teacher to get a score even above 1 under this methodology. A typical student with an average teacher's classroom will achieve the national NWEA growth norm only about 50 or 60% of the time. So if you were to set up a system like this that looks very similar to, let's say, a grading scale of ABCD, something like that, you could really have a hard time meeting those goals. The chances that a teacher would meet the target with 80% of her students is probably a lot lower than she was expecting her likelihood to be to get that 3 on that SLO. So there's some danger here, even with good data like the MAP RIT scores, even with national growth norms, there's a chance here that you could set yourself up for a system that doesn't make sense. So what our approach is thinking about using national growth norms might not work that well because if a teacher's students don't have typical demographic characteristics, doesn't have typical family resources, if it's not in a typical school, in a typical district, in a typical state, those national growth norms might not be the best thing to use in addition to the idea of where do you set those thresholds. We're saying accounting for context is key, and that's what we're trying to bring to this process with our technical SLOs that Anne-Marie is going to talk a little bit more about now.
Thanks, Sean. As Sean said, we want to be able to bring some additional data and metrics to thinking about SLOs and using the great data with the NWEA MAP assessment that we have historically with this consortium. So first I just want to kind of take a step back and talk through some of how we got to this SLO tool. First of all, as Sean talked about at the beginning, value added is backward looking. You need to have both the pre-test and the post-test completed. For the upcoming school year for value added, we would wait until the spring 2016 assessments have been taken, and then we would begin the analysis for value added, thinking about where the starting achievement score, scale score was for the student, and comparing the predicted score to the actual achievement score and figuring out the value added. Again, with the value added piece being backward looking and needing to have both of those tests completed. For the fall goal setting, the spring data isn't available yet since it hasn't happened yet. So where we're thinking, when we're thinking about being in that fall and having the spring data, but the spring 2015 data, but not having the spring 2016 data, we can use the data that we have, the value-added modeling that we've done historically, to think about what the prediction would be for that student based off of their different characteristics and achievement scale score from the previous spring. And then thinking what different range of goals would be, a lower, medium, or higher goal for growth at the student level. So when we thought about being able to use this data in a forward-looking way, we wanted to be able to get a lot of different feedback. And we compiled feedback from members of the consortium, both from webinars and surveys, as well as having internal EA focus groups where we had various experts from Dr. Meyer to our team of econometricians, SLO experts, data experts, to try and think of what can we do mathematically, what can we do with the data we have available, and what can we do in the timeline. So we wanted to be able to combine the rigor of the value-added models with being able to have something that's forward-looking for the purpose of using that with Wisconsin's student learning objectives. Thinking a little bit more specifically about the actual process and the tool that we're developing for the fall. So once the fall rosters have been sent to NWEA, EA will receive the rosters and be able to send back an SLO tool that will be able to give a variety of metrics in addition to just the growth. So this tool will be in Excel, but this is a demonstration of how that tool would work. So at the top here we have some of the historical data. So in this case, this is the 4th grade math teacher, and that their historical grade subject team value added is 2.2, and their percentile historically is 25th percentile. This teacher would then be able to set a classroom growth goal and be able to see what goal percentile that would be in order to think about, is this an achievable goal for me? Also, once they're able to play around with that classroom growth goal a bit, selecting different growth goals, they'll be able to see the various spring targets for different students based off of the different pretest and student characteristics. So in this case, a teacher might first select a lower growth goal and to see what that percentile and spring targets would look like. They can also see what an average growth would look like for different students and their goal percentile, as well as higher growth, and be able to play around with those different classroom growth goals to see what would be a good fit for their SLO. So this fall goal setting tool would incorporate several different metrics to give teachers more information for their fall goal setting. So they would receive this Excel tool that would show them the spring scores, student scores based off of the various growth goals that they can choose. And that will give them more information about how that growth goal classroom level what that would look like at the student level. They'll also receive the percentile of the growth goal to see how achievable their goal is, whether it's a lower percentile or higher percentile. And they'll also receive the historical grade subject value added score to gauge how their grade and subject team has done historically for growth. One note about the grades for this tool. For value added, we're able to offer value added estimates for grades kindergarten through 9th grade. But for the SLO tool, we're only going to be able to offer that for grades 1 through 9, specifically for any grades and students who have prior spring MAP scores. So if you test K through 9, this would only be available in grades 1 through 9, since we wouldn't have prior spring scores for the kindergartners. So for example, the first tested grade won't be included, so if you test 3 through 8, the tool will only be available for grades 4 through 8. Any students who are new to the district won't be included in the itemized list of students. But again, the teachers will be setting a classroom level growth goal, and then the student information is available to see how that looks like for different students. Once the growth goals have been decided using the SLO tool, then the teachers need to actually write the SLO, and DPI has provided a template, as I'm sure you've seen, with all these different areas of content that's required for the teachers to come up with a statement. And our team of policy experts is developing different language for this tool for each one of these areas of the template, so that teachers can have that information available when they are writing their SLOs. In the spring, once the SLOs have been written and captured and we've gone through the winter update and the spring assessment has been completed, then we have to think about scoring the SLOs. And we'll have to think about what does it mean to have a score of a 2 or a 3 or a 4. And so we want to work with the consortium to determine sort of best practices or a guide for how to score the SLOs, and then it'll be up to the districts to make a decision about what they want to do to translate the SLOs to a 1 to 4 score. These are the different areas of the SLO process that EA is going to be providing guidance and assistance. The biggest part of it being that fall goal setting with the growth tool. In addition to what I just talked about, the scoring on SLOs, DPI also has a rubric for rating the SLO process itself, and we've developed this system with that rating rubric in mind to help rate that process in a positive way. In terms of the timeline for this work, we will be doing the sort of pre-analysis of that spring data over the summer, and once the districts submit rosters, then EA will be able to receive those NWEA rosters and be able to send out the tool. Now, the reason that I don't have many specifics here on the actual timeline is that different districts test at different times in the fall. So we're looking to possibly send out the SLO tool in batches to districts so that the districts who test earlier in the fall aren't waiting for the last district to test in the fall to receive the tool. In addition to the various guidances and the SLO tool, there's going to be training webinars. There'll be 2 webinars for teacher training, as well as a webinar for district liaisons. We're going to have each district designate a liaison to aggregate any of the questions that come up from the teachers and be able to work directly with EA to have any of those questions answered. In terms of next steps for both projects, the value-added reporting is going to remain the same at $1 per tested student, and that's for both the Excel reporting as well as the PDF report. The way that we count students is each student is counted once per student and not per test. So if Sean takes the reading and math assessment, you'll only be charged $1 for Sean. And that'll be invoiced through CISA 2, just like it has been in the past. after the reports have been delivered. For the SLO support, we'll be charging $3 per tested student, again counted in the same way. This is for, again, for reading and math assessments, and then the grades depend on which grades you test in, as well as not being able to do this tool for the first grade of the grade ranges that you test in. This will also be invoiced through CISA 2. We're going to do 2 invoicing for this, once after the SLO tool itself has been delivered in the fall, and then the remainder will be invoiced in the spring. There are separate agreements for the value added and the SLO work, and we'll be sending the value added contract out in the next couple weeks and the SLO contract out after that. I'm going to email that out to all districts who've been in the consortium previously, as well as anyone who has attended the webinars. We're looking for the value-added contracts to be returned by June 15th, and for the SLO contracts to be returned July 31st. In addition to the contracts, there will be data release letters from NWEA that will also need to be returned as well. Any questions about the consortium, the value-added project, or the SLO project? Well, please feel free to type in any of the questions that you have about either of these products. And feel free to send me an email after the webinar if you have any questions that you think of later. Jessica, it sounds like we have a question.
Yes. What type of model does your value added make use of, and do you control for any school characteristics?
So we use a multivariate linear regression model to do our value added analysis. And our analysis that we've done so far in the past has used student-level demographic characteristics as controls. It has not used school-level averages in it. The decision made there was to mimic the model that has been used by the Department of Public Instruction for the WKCE value-added model in the past. That's how that decision was made, to try to align it as close as we could as possible. That also, this past year and into the future, is how we're deciding how we're going to group the demographic characteristics of students. We're trying to group it as similarly as possible to that DPI model as well. For example, how many groupings do we do for the special education categories of students? Sometimes we have to do it a little bit differently in that we have a smaller reference group than the state does. So sometimes we have to group those together in a slightly different way. But in general, our methodology is trying as much as possible to do the same thing that the state model is doing, so people can use the same kind of knowledge they have across both systems to understand the comparability across both. Please let me know if there's any other follow-up questions along those lines or anything else, and I'd be happy to try to add more detail.
We're going to continue to stay on the line and answer any questions that come up, but I just wanted to thank you for joining us today to discuss these 2 different products. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call, and we can discuss the products further.